My father died on a Tuesday in October, and by Thursday, my older brother had already called a real estate attorney. I didn't know that at the time. I was still at the house in Millhaven, going through Dad's closet, folding shirts that still smelled like him, trying to figure out which of his old work boots I wanted to keep. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, technically, was 3 states away, and he didn't come for the funeral until Saturday morning. He hugged me at the door with one arm and spent most of the reception on his phone by the back fence. I noticed. I just didn't know what it meant yet. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I'm 29 years old. I moved back to Millhaven 4 years ago to help my dad after his first stroke, and I gave up a job offer in Denver to do it. My brother did not offer to help. My brother lives well, drives a new truck every 2 years, and had not visited our father more than twice in the last 36 months. But he is the firstborn son, and in our family that used to mean something. It meant something to my grandfather too, which is why, when my grandfather died 11 years ago, he left the Millhaven property to my dad and not to my uncle. My dad was the one who stayed. That's the rule in this family, unwritten but understood. You stay, you inherit, you leave. You don't get to come back and collect. My brother had apparently decided that rule no longer applied. Let me back up to the beginning because this story doesn't start with my dad's death. It starts about 8 months before that, on a Sunday afternoon in February, when Dad called me into the living room and told me to sit down. The TV was off, which was unusual. He had a manila envelope on the coffee table, and he was wearing his good reading glasses, not the drugstore ones. He pushed the envelope toward me. "I need you to look at something," he said. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, 3 pages. His own handwriting. Shaky from the stroke, but deliberate. He'd clearly worked on it. And paperwork. A trust document his attorney had drawn up, transferring the house and the adjacent lot and the equipment barn into something called the Millhaven Family Trust. My name was listed as the sole trustee and sole beneficiary. The document had been signed and notarized 6 weeks earlier. Dad had done this quietly, without telling me. "I did it before I got worse," he said. "I didn't want to do it after, when people might say I wasn't thinking right." I asked him what he meant by people. He looked at me the way fathers look at you when they think you already know the answer, and they don't want to be the one to say it out loud. "Your brother's gonna want this house," he said. "He's always wanted it. He just didn't want to do what was needed to earn it." I sat with that for a long time. The February light was flat and pale through the front window, and I could hear the furnace ticking. My dad's hands were in his lap, and he looked tired in a way that had become familiar to me over the past few years. Not just physically tired, but tired of carrying something. "You could have told me," I said. "I'm telling you now." He explained the structure. The trust was already funded. The house, the barn, none of it was in his personal name anymore. It had been transferred cleanly, with proper documentation, recorded with the county. His attorney had handled everything. If anything happened to him, the assets wouldn't go through probate. They would simply remain in the trust, and I, as trustee, would continue managing them exactly as I had been doing for the past 4 years. He handed me a second document, smaller, just a single page, the handwritten letter. He told me to read it later, not now. He said it explained his thinking, his wishes, and the reasons behind everything. I put it back in the envelope, and I didn't open it again until after he was gone. He died 7 months later. The second stroke took him fast, which is the only mercy I can identify in any of this. He was unconscious by the time the ambulance arrived. He did not suffer long. My brother flew in 2 days after. His wife stayed home. He came alone and he shook my hand at the door and he said, "We need to talk about the estate. Not I'm sorry about Dad. Not how are you holding up. We need to talk about the estate." I told him we could talk after the funeral. He agreed, and for 2 days he was tolerable. He helped carry chairs. He spoke at the service. He cried, and I believe the tears were real. Because whatever else my brother is, I don't think he wished our father dead. He just had a plan for what came after. 3 days after the burial, he sat across from me at my dad's kitchen table. My kitchen table now, though I wasn't thinking of it that way yet. And he put a folder of his own down on the surface. "I've had an attorney look at Dad's estate," he said. "Based on what I found, he died intestate." I asked him what he meant by what he'd found. "He didn't have a current will," my brother said. "The one from 2014 is outdated. Under state intestacy law, we split everything equally. The house, the property, all of it, 50-50. He said it the way people say things when they've rehearsed them. Clean, flat, no hesitation. He had a printout of intestacy statutes in his folder. He also had a business card from a real estate firm. I looked at the business card from a real estate firm. I looked at my brother. I thought about the envelope in my father's filing cabinet, which I had moved into my own room after his death because I didn't trust. And I am not proud of this, but I didn't trust, leaving it anywhere accessible. I'll look into it, I said. He nodded like that was the expected response. It is also the question of the house itself, he said. I've had it appraised. It's worth more than either of us probably expected. If we sell, we both come out well. If you want to buy me out, we can talk about that too. He'd had it appraised. He'd had it appraised while I was still washing the casserole dishes people had brought to the reception. I told him I needed some time to process everything. He said he understood, but that he'd need an answer within 30 days. Within 30 days. Like we were negotiating a lease. After he left that evening, I sat in my dad's chair for a long time. The house was quiet, in the way that houses get after someone dies. Not empty exactly, but subtracted from. I could hear the refrigerator and the wind off the fields and nothing else. I got out the envelope. I read the letter. My dad wrote about the property the way people write about things they love without knowing how to say it directly. He wrote about his own father building the equipment barn in 1967, about the summer he spent reshingling the roof when he was 24. He wrote about the year the backfield flooded and he and my grandfather spent 3 weekends digging drainage channels by hand. He wrote about me, how I'd come back when he needed help, how I'd stayed, how I'd fixed the fence and serviced the tractor and driven him to every appointment for 4 years without complaint. Then he wrote about my brother. He didn't write with anger. That was the thing that got me. He wrote with something more like grief, like he had already mourned the relationship and was simply documenting what remained. He wrote that he loved his older son, but that he had watched him grow into someone who measured everything by what it was worth rather than what it cost to build. He wrote that the Millhaven property was not a financial asset to be liquidated. It was a record of a family's labor across 3 generations, and he intended for it to stay that way. He ended the letter by writing, "If your brother comes for this house, show him the trust documents. That's all you need to do." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. The next morning, I called the attorney who had set up the trust. My dad had left me his contact information, a man named after a mid-century city. Steady voice, no drama. I explained what my brother had said. The attorney confirmed what I already knew. There was nothing to split. The property had been transferred into the trust 14 months before my father's death. At the time of transfer, my dad had been mentally competent, had signed in the presence of witnesses and a notary, and the deed had been properly recorded. My brother's intestacy argument was based on the assumption that my dad owned the house at the time of his death. He did not. The trust owned it. Your brother's attorney either doesn't know about the trust or is hoping you don't, the attorney said. I asked which he thought was more likely. A pause. I'd contact your brother and let him know the situation before this goes any further. I did not contact my brother immediately. I spent 4 days thinking about it. During those 4 days, I also noticed that someone had been through my dad's filing cabinet in his bedroom. Not ransacked, but disturbed. The hanging folders were out of order in a way they hadn't been before. I don't know exactly when it happened. My brother had been in the house for 2 days before the funeral, and he'd slept in the guest room down the hall. I am not making an accusation. I'm just describing what I found. On the 5th day, my brother called me. "I want to move forward," he said. "I've given you enough time. My attorney is prepared to file a petition." I told him I had something to show him. He drove back to Millhaven that weekend. When he pulled into the driveway, I was standing on the front porch. I was holding the trust documents in a folder. Not dramatically, not for effect, just because I had them in my hand, and I'd been reviewing them one more time before he arrived. He got out of his truck and walked toward the porch, and he looked at the folder in my hand, and something in his expression shifted. Just slightly, the way a person's face shifts when they've been certain about something, and suddenly become less certain. "What is that?" he said. I told him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I handed him the first document, the trust declaration, and I watched him read the first page. His wife, as I later found out, had told him this was a bad idea. She had told him months ago to just let it go. I have some gratitude toward her for that, even though it didn't matter. He read the document for a long time. Standing on the gravel driveway in his good coat because he dressed up, I think for what he expected to be a confrontation he would win. This has to be challenged, he said finally. He wasn't toward the end, his cognitive function. He set this up 14 months before he died, I said. When he was walking on his own and driving to the hardware store. The notary can confirm. The attorney can confirm. His physician can confirm. People can be pressured, he said. People can be. He did this without telling me, I said. He handed it to me in February and said he'd done it 6 weeks earlier. I didn't know it existed. I didn't ask him to do it. The letter explains his reasoning in his own handwriting. My brother looked at the porch. He looked at the front of the house. The repainted shutters, the fixed gutter I'd repaired in August, the new weather stripping on the door. He didn't say anything for a while. I drove 3 hours, he said. I know. He should have talked to me. And this is the part I think about most, looking back. Because I could have said something cutting there. I had a list of things I could have said. I could have pointed out that he had not visited more than twice in 3 years. That he had not answered the phone the night of the first stroke until the third call. But he had stood at the back fence on the day of the reception and talked on his phone while our dad's neighbors brought casseroles and stood in the kitchen not knowing where to put them. I didn't say any of that. No, I said. He probably should have. I'm sorry he didn't. I meant it. I think that surprised him more than the documents did. He left about 20 minutes later. There were no lawyers after that, no petitions filed. His attorney, I was later told through a mutual acquaintance, had reviewed the trust documents and told him that challenging a properly executed irrevocable trust on undue influence grounds, with no evidence of cognitive impairment at the time of signing, was expensive and very unlikely to succeed. The house is still mine. Still the trust's, technically, which means it's protected in ways that a personal asset isn't. Creditors can't touch it. Probate can't touch it. And if I ever have my own kids, the transfer to the next generation is already built into the document. I still have the letter. I keep it in the same envelope in the same filing cabinet, which I've since had properly locked. Some nights I sit on the porch, where I was standing that afternoon, and I think about my dad driving himself to the attorney's office 14 months before he died, dressed in his good clothes, shaky hands and clear mind, signing the documents he'd spent months thinking about, not telling me, trusting me to handle it when the time came. There's a particular kind of love that doesn't announce itself. It just does the work ahead of schedule and leaves you the instructions. I think about that a lot. My brother and I still talk occasionally. It's not warm, but it's not nothing. His wife texted me at Christmas. I texted back. I don't know what the next few years look like between us. I don't know if it gets better. What I know is that the backfield is dry this fall. The drainage is holding. And when I serviced the tractor last month, I found one of my grandfather's old wrenches in the tool compartment. 60 years old. Still good. I put it back where I found it. Some things you don't move. I've thought a lot about what my dad actually did, and the more I sit with it, the more I realize it wasn't just a legal move. It was a statement about how he saw the world, about what he believed gets rewarded and what doesn't. He watched 2 sons grow up in the same house, under the same roof, with the same starting point. One of them left and built a comfortable life and measured things in appraisal values. One of them came back and fixed the gutters and drove to medical appointments and stayed. My dad didn't treat those 2 paths as equal because they weren't equal. That's not harshness. That's honesty. And I think a lot of people in their 70s, who have watched enough of life play out, understand that difference in a way younger people sometimes don't want to hear. What I keep coming back to is this. My brother is not a villain. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easier if he were. He's a person who made a series of choices that added up to absence, and then expected the accounting to be done differently than it was. That happens in a lot of families. The person who shows up doesn't always get recognized. The person who leaves sometimes comes back and finds a way to claim what the labor of others built. It's one of the oldest patterns there is. But my dad saw it coming. That's what I find remarkable. He didn't wait for it to become a fight. He didn't hope my brother would do the right thing on his own. He sat down with an attorney in his good clothes, with shaky hands, and he did the work of protecting what 3 generations had built, quietly, without drama, without telling me until it was done. That takes a particular kind of clear-eyed intelligence. Not book intelligence. The kind that comes from paying attention to people for 60-some years and knowing, finally, what they're capable of. I think about that when I have hard decisions to make. Now what I hope will happen. What I actually know, based on what I've seen. My dad taught me that the gap between those two things, between hope and observation, is where most people get hurt. The 4 years I spent here, I won't pretend were easy. There were weeks that were genuinely hard. Nights I wondered if I'd made the wrong call passing on Denver. But I made a choice based on what I believe was right, not on what was convenient, and I showed up for that choice every day. My dad saw that. He didn't say it much. He wasn't that kind of man, but he saw it, and he acted on what he saw. I think that's the thing worth holding on to. Not the trust, not the property, not the legal outcome. The fact that doing the right thing, consistently, without an audience, without recognition, still gets noticed by the people who are paying attention. And sometimes those people leave you something more than a house. They leave you the proof that it mattered. The wrench I found in the tractor last month is still in the tool compartment. 60 years old. Still good. My grandfather put it there, and my dad knew it was there, and neither of them moved it. I'm not moving it either. Some things you earn by staying,